Hi, and welcome to what will be the first of hopefully many Caves of Narsh podcasts. We'll call them CoNcasts because we do that with everything that we do here at Con.
You're a horrible person.
Yes, I am a horrible person. I am Josh. You may know me as Rangers51. I am the founder and webmaster of Caves of Narsh at cavesofnarsh.com. The crabby British chap that you heard break in there for a second, he can introduce himself.
I'm Tiddles, and I just still hang around here because I've got nothing else to do.
Which
Hi.
is really what we all do, and that's the best reason for it.
Yeah.
Because,
Pretty much.
the more life you have, the less likely it is that you're playing any of the games that Caves of Narsh has on it anyway. So it works out okay for everybody.
I don't even play them.
Fair point. You may also hear in the background, in the recording studio in Massachusetts, where I'm currently sitting, a toddler. And that's because she has nowhere else to go either, just like Tiddles.
Yep.
So she will also be guesting with us today, and hopefully later on we'll have a couple more guests from the Caves of Narsh staff popping in to talk about stuff with us.
So much better than that other toddler we used to have around.
Oh, yes, indeed. He always asked for things. Attention, mainly.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's carry on. Since this is our pilot episode, and you are one of the 7 people listening to it, you probably won't need this background that we're about to give you, but we thought it would be a good thing for us to start off by telling you guys a little bit about who we are and why we're doing this podcast. Mainly because we're not sure that we can fill a half hour, or however long we want this to be, because we're not very interesting people. So anything we can do
really
for
not.
anything we can do for filler is almost certainly going to help us out a lot. Now, as I said, my name's Josh. I'm the guy that's been around the longest. I started the site back in 1997, and now only 16 or so years later, we're finally doing a podcast.
Such a depressing number.
Well, there's a lot of depressing things that we could talk about. Let's try to avoid those as much as we can. We haven't done a podcast before. We may be a little bit behind the curve on some of the new and trendier things. Not that you can call podcasting new or trendy per se. But for 2013, we're trying to make a little bit more of a go at the things that all the young whippersnappers are into these days. So you should be seeing our presence felt a little bit more on social media like Facebook and Twitter. Hopefully this podcast will get more than 19 viewers, and then subtracting the 3 or 4 that are likely to be from our families. And that'll give us enough impetus to keep this going as well.
Yeah, for 2013, we're basically trying to get as far as 2003, so bear with us.
Given our game coverage, I figure if we can stay about 10 years behind the curve, we're probably doing all right.
We're doing great for us.
Yeah, it's true. And we'll get to that probably a little bit later on. And for us and our standard of work over the last few years, I think we've really been cranking stuff out lately.
Well, the standard's been fine. Quality over quantity by some margin.
Yes, I think that when you start doing quantity of 0, though, you start getting into some kind of division by error.
We should ask Tom about that. He'll probably give us some fascinating stats. I'm hoping what he's going to say is our quality is infinite while our quantity is 0. So,
Tom, for anybody who hasn't been around for years and years and years, is a staffer who still hangs out with us from time to time, but he's also pursuing a PhD in mathematics from, I believe, the University of Missouri. And most of the stuff that he likes talking about now is stuff that nobody understands.
Let me tell you this, I have never seen so much maths in a Twitter feed.
That's why
but it's entertaining. I enjoy reading it. So
I don't follow him on Twitter. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's at Caves of Narsh. It's also Caves of Narsh on Facebook, and we do a lousy job of promoting that on the site proper, but that's one of the things I'm going to be working on soon. Now, anyway, back to the topic that I was about to kick off 5 minutes ago. This is our first podcast, again, and we're hoping to make a chain of these. I don't know how often, I don't know how many, but we'll see what we can come up with. And the reason we're starting this now, after all this time, is really kind of, we wanted to do something similar. We've had some con people that used to be on TeamSpeak together a lot. Some of them are still around, some not. And we always seem to have pretty entertaining conversations, very rarely about Final Fantasy. So if we can harness a little bit of that energy and maybe make it a little bit more relevant to the site's audience, then maybe we've got a winner here. And con staffer Laszlow came to us a couple weeks ago and said, there really aren't that many awesome gaming podcasts. The ones that have good content sometimes have poor personalities. The ones that have great personalities are sometimes boring or just run on way too long. And you guys might be able to find a good middle ground for that. I hear you laughing.
Run on way too long. We may already be onto a loser there, but we'll see how we go.
Well, this is the magic of editing. So far, it's looking like we're at about 8.5 minutes, and I'm pretty sure the first 2 minutes of that was you screwing up my count so I could start the recording.
Happy to help.
But yeah, we're going to try this. We think that we've got a little bit of a different podcast. Obviously, we're highly professional. Yeah, that'll definitely get edited. We think we've got a different perspective from most other Final Fantasy sites out there. There's definitely some out there that are bigger than us. I don't know for sure that there are really any that have been around longer than us anymore. The only one that
technically.
Well, I mean, if you consider ones where people lost control of their original domain and then had to kind of like manually port their audience from one site to a completely different one. We've never had to do that. We've come close a couple times. But
we did lose OP Gaming. That was a little hair-raising.
That was a blow. And that's why we started running things ourselves. Maybe that's a topic for another one. When people actually express some level of interest in the history of us that they can't get from the site already because we've written pages and pages of it.
Let's just go with if rather than when, to be fair.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing's kind of an if. Now, not only do I think we've got a little bit different of a perspective than most Final Fantasy sites or most Final Fantasy podcasters, largely because we have people that focus mainly on the older ones and not the newer ones, I think it also helps that in one way or another, we're all intensely ugly people. And I'd like to think that I'm ugly mainly only in personality, but I'm not going to bet the farm on it. Tiddles, you're... Well, I think you're dashing because you're a British guy, but you're...
man. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. We'll get the other guys in here later, and they're nothing to look at either.
I think my least favourite thing about myself is my horrible nasally voice, so that's only going to go well for this. Oh, my sound card's actually got a thing where I can change my voice now, so maybe I should try that next time. We'll see.
Could you sound American?
I don't know. We'll have to find out. You probably sound like a Dalek. I mean, that's probably what most sound cards can do by accident if they go wrong, so they probably built it in. Actually,
that brings up an interesting point. I want to see if maybe your sound card has a setting where you can sound like David Tennant in that that American pilot that we found on YouTube the other day, because that was the most amazing, like, half Scottish, half American accent. Not that I've heard any of those, but
if you were Scottish trying to do an accent, that's what it would sound like.
I'm fairly poor at accenting. Okay, we're digressing again.
Yeah.
Now, the tone of what we're doing here in the podcast is pretty similar, I think, at least so far, to what we do on the site. We're not a wiki. And we've had people ask, hey, why aren't you a wiki? Well, part of it is when we started doing things, there wasn't such thing as a wiki. We were kind of the closest thing you could do to a wiki, where you could email us and then we'd put something on the site for you. But something that you lose is a little bit of the personality when you have so many voices contributing to the same thing. We've got a more common voice, and by doing a podcast with 2, 3, 4 people, however many, most of whom will have been around for quite a while, I think we're going to have that kind of consistent voice, similar to what we have on the site. If you read our site, we're going to sound a little bit, the word that was given to me the other day in IM was snarky, and I have no issue with being called snarky, so let's go with that. Tiddles is British, again, naturally snarky. That's the way it's going to go.
You haven't noticed at this point.
Yeah, you may notice that he's mainly snarky towards me, and
and deservedly so. Mostly.
Yeah, and you're a great foil for me, on top of the fact that we've been friends
Yeah.
for like 10 years. And hopefully when people get sick of listening to me, they will be more willing to listen to you.
Well,
If
you never
indeed
know.
I invite you back for more episodes. Um, we think that what we have to offer is good for you guys out there. And while we may be a little rough around the edges as we do this first podcast, hopefully if we keep doing them, we'll get to that point there too, where we're giving things that you maybe didn't know you wanted or didn't know that you were interested in hearing. Maybe we'll find those eventually. Not yet. Not yet.
I've had a lot of trouble with the police about giving people things that they didn't want, but I thought they wanted. So we should probably stay away from that.
And that is when this became the subject of a subpoena. We believe that gamers are not just 13-year-olds playing Call of Duty on Xbox Live.
It's just mainly that.
Well, unfortunately they are, and unfortunately that is what people, who aren't gamers look at gamers as. And this podcast obviously is going to change that. We're going to be incredibly niche, and the people who are going to be listening to us, if any, are going to feel the same way, where, they already know that there's more to gaming than, hurling sexual epithets on Xbox Live. They know this because they're playing the same games that we've played over the years. They're playing Final Fantasy. You don't get a whole lot of smack talk with that. And there's an audience for that. There has to be. We're not going to come in here and, curse for a half hour in the guise of being edgy. And we're going to treat our audience like they're our age. I'm fast approaching my mid-30s. Tiddles, you're getting pretty old too.
Yeah.
Now, you just had a birthday a couple weeks ago.
I did.
I'm trying to do the math. That's 30, right? You're 30 now.
30, yeah.
That
feels like 5 years have passed in the last year, actually, but
well,
that's a whole other story.
And that's I sympathize with you for that, but I'm kind of the same way, given the fact that I spend 24 hours a day with a small child who is currently trying to steal the mouse from my other computer and do nefarious things with it. That also ages you pretty quickly. But the point there is, we're not 15. We've been around the block a few times, and hopefully that gives us another good perspective that we can bring to you.
I think with us, when we were 15, we weren't 15, if you know what I mean.
That kind of leads me into the first thing that I wanted to talk about as part of the podcast. Our first real topic after all of this yammering. And it's something that's...
40 minutes, was it? Blimey.
I don't know
it
what
felt
I can
like
do
40.
for you. Yeah, well, obviously your time is starting to run a little bit faster than everybody else's.
That's a plus at this point.
I told you the fact that my time changed last weekend and yours didn't. We're recording this in mid-March, by the way. And that's just completely thrown me off. So not only are we less time apart than we usually are right now, you're also running at a faster clip. So eventually you'll get further ahead again. And, oh God.
It's like a timey-wimey episode of Doctor Who.
We do have two more people that have jumped into the fray. Again, not counting my child, who is now roaming my office, carrying around what appears to be an installation disk for Office 2003. I need to clean around here more often. First up, we've got Laszlow from Con, who has been around for quite a while now. Laz, how long have you been around?
I think on the forums the official start date is 2003, but it's safer to assume I've been around Con for 8-ish years. It's like I signed up for the forums lurking a little while, and then I started commenting more actively in 0405.
By the way, that was a great start to your introduction.
Oh yeah,
just putting that out there. Also joining us from Dublin, Ireland, we've got Alex, and he is Death Penalty at the site forums and in the chat. What you got to say, Alex?
Not much of value, but we'll go for it anyhow. Yes,
Join the club.
Death Penalty, DP, Alex, Jeffrey. There's a whole collection of names that may or may not show up, so I'm all of them. I've been around 06 or 07, so not quite as long as any of the rest of you, but long enough.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, DP, but you are a double major in university right now. Philosophy and English, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
So we're expecting a lot out of you here. And
Oh dear.
if you disappoint us, you won't actually be allowed back into the country.
Okay. Well, oof.
This reminds me of that boring bit at the beginning of quiz shows where they ask people for anecdotes about their lives. Has anybody got any anecdotes about their lives that are particularly not very funny but are supposed to be funny?
I work as a manhole inspector.
I'm sorry.
What?
I feel like I have no choice but to let that go, given what I was saying a few minutes ago about elevating the conversation. But I want it on the record that it is taking all of my self-control to just let that slide.
Should we just go with Fanar and let that be that?
Yes, very few people will understand what you just said for a variety of reasons, but let's go with it.
Now I'm only professional manhole inspector, not in I don't inspect in a recreational manner.
So what you're saying is you do it for pay?
Yes.
This is,
Can somebody else talk for a minute here?
There's no salvaging this. Somebody quick, give us a talking point.
So what was that topic you were going to talk about, John?
I had a topic. It is.
This podcast is going to go on for 10 years.
Yeah, we'll break it up into a multi-parter.
It already has.
It's. What I was going to talk about right here and right now was something that is relevant both to hopefully us talking right now and hopefully people listening, because if we're not checking off both those boxes, we might be wasting our time just a little bit. Caves and Arsh, as I mentioned at the start of the show, is a fan site. Been around for a real long time, and a lot of stuff has changed, both on the internet and for fan sites and for websites in general since we first came around. I'd like to point out here that I was interviewed by 1UP a couple of years ago. They've just died, so it's kind of, I guess, morbid in a way to bring that up now. But a few years ago, they did a feature on some of the longest running fan sites or most popular fan sites. Obviously, they brought us in for longest running. But, they asked us, all the people they interviewed, what have you seen that has changed and what has made that different for you, and has it changed the way that you do business? And I certainly know where I'm coming from on that, and I'm sure I'll get to it momentarily, but you guys who are not necessarily quite as emotionally invested in it as I am, what do you guys think about this? Do you guys still use fan sites that aren't con, or is this kind of the last vestige of a bygone era as far as you're concerned?
Well, you know about my other retro fetish of Sonic games, so I tend to hang around Sonic Retro, which is pretty big in that department. But I mean, the most obvious thing that springs to mind as having changed is the big rise of social media. People just go and talk about things centralized on Facebook or on Twitter or on any of these sites that kids use, rather than just finding a dedicated fan site like ours is more these days. But I don't know, I feel like maybe that things like GameFAQs were already kind of pulling that way even before the rise of Facebook and the like.
Yeah, maybe it makes me a little...
All of them.
Go ahead.
Where you can access a bunch of different things in one. I know
maybe
that whenever
it makes me a little bit old-fashioned, I guess. But I mean, I think it's kind of really annoying navigating extremely large text files, or God forbid, going on to Yahoo Answers to find video game information. So I like it when, if there's a dedicated fan site that has things organized in a sensible manner and can provide things like images and maps. I'm a huge fan of that, and Con has been doing a very good job of that for several years.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yay!
I think I first used it.
Lately, but...
I think I first used it when I was playing Final Fantasy V for the first time, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
That's incredibly unfortunate because,
Yeah.
until pretty recently, our Final Fantasy V content was definitely the worst of anything that we had on the site.
Yeah.
And it was still better than everyone else's, so there.
Well, yeah, you're not wrong, and that's the amazing thing about it, and that's probably testament to the relative popularity of 5 relative to the other games in the series.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to kick that game while it's down.
The best and only coverage.
God knows I do that enough.
And,
I was saying that the other day I was saying that to somebody the other day in chat, how Con has sort of spoiled me for all other walkthroughs. I go to some other site and I try to look up a walkthrough for something else, and I just kind of hate it. You have to scroll through the long wall of text or whatever, and you have to, search different terms and stuff instead of the nice convenient links. But whenever I can, I definitely go to another sort of fan site for the games, whether it be Chrono Compendium is a pretty good site.
That is a fantastic site.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that we do in our Chrono Trigger section that equals or possibly even surpasses it, but for the depth of that entire series, those guys are pretty amazing. So props to you guys when you totally don't listen to this ever.
I think the great thing about visiting a site like Chrono Compendium, or I'd like to think us, is that you get the feeling that there's a bunch of people who are really invested in getting good content out there, who really actually like and enjoy talking about and writing about and, are interested in the subject. You used to get, back when fan sites were, I suppose, gaming fan sites were a bigger thing, you would get just endless Final Fantasy websites, none of which had any redeeming features. Like all the ones you'd want to affiliate with us, where you'd just have page with a stolen layout, and it would have lists of things that happened in the games with no thought to whether anybody would ever find any of these things remotely useful or well organized. And people just, I think, they saw other successful sites and they wanted to make their own and kind of get a slice of the pie without wanting to give people something. They just wanted to kind of make something that people would come to and be the big daddy or something. But
well, sure. I actually remember one time back in 2005 or something where somebody just tried to lift an entire section off of our site. Just file, save as.
Yeah, wasn't it the FF7 section that had recently launched? I remember this, yeah.
Yeah, it was right after that section launched, yeah. I hadn't thought about that in quite a while. I don't think I could even tell you where it used to be, but yeah.
Go on. I wonder if there's a fan site for all of the other terrible fan sites that indexes them.
Would it be mean-spirited if I did that?
Well, it'd be
a fascinating exercise.
I could troll archive.org for a couple days.
There used to be Beta FF who were kind of pretty big on
I thought that Tiddles brought up a pretty interesting point, and I think it's probably one that he and I have talked about in context of other things from time to time in the past. And that's, the rise of social media is really a game changer for pretty much every site. And I just use the word game changer and I kind of hate myself for it. But
you've already done quote unquote, so there's really no redeeming it.
And Web 1.0, so I
know.
Pretty much every target audience for this hates me right now. That includes
I almost have a bingo on my corporate bingo sheet right now.
I'm a suit. There's no way around it. The way I put it, and I use Facebook a lot personally. I use Twitter a lot now for con, not much less so for me personally. But the thing that I call it narcissism, because I think that social media breeds narcissism in all of us, and whether we recognize it or not doesn't necessarily make it any better, but it makes it so that everything is completely centered around the individual. You have this constant feed of things that are allegedly suited to your interests, and they just get spoon-fed to you in a never-ending feed of stuff. And I think that's the sort of thing that makes people less likely to be part of a real community. Because when you're just getting spoon-fed all this stuff over and over and day in and day out, do you really feel like you have a need to go out and actually make connections, even if they're e-connections, with a lot of other people just because they share your interests?
Maybe, but a lot of that narcissism, I think, takes me back to the point I was making a minute ago. A lot of these fan sites that just sprung up, that was just the old version of that, wasn't it? People would make their own Final Fantasy site, say, I don't want to be run by this guy anymore, I'm going to make my own Final Fantasy site, hookers and blackjack, and, you know, they'd have a few friends, and they would come and join them, and they'd post between each other and create, 6 topics ever in their forum.
Yeah.
And we've kind of seen it even on our own IRC server. When things were bigger, people would form their own splinter channels where they were the center of attention. And, I guess we just have a bigger and more obvious medium to do it now.
Yeah. Kind of enables it. No, I think you're right, though, Tiddles, because I think when you do have a forum that's got a lot of traffic in it and a lot of members, you do definitely get, I think that in itself sort of breeds a degree of snarkiness, really. You get some people who are, there are people who read my comments and I'm important and, so I think it does happen when you have anything, of a certain size, basically. But at the same time, I think Josh was perhaps onto something in that the social media now is not so much organized around, here's one sort of governing principle, e.g., we all like Final Fantasy. It's more, everyone just come here and you'll, get a little bit of what you like from everyone, basically, instead of sort of the idea of the fan site is you all come together because you have sort of a shared interest, and then you sort of go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's always been something that we've run into a time or two over the years with chat, especially because our chat in particular is just widely varied. There's not a whole lot of Final Fantasy chat, but when it does kick in, people always seem to have something to say.
Yeah.
But then it's more general interest.
We've spent so much time talking about Final Fantasy for so many years of our lives, we've sort of run out of Final Fantasy things to talk about to a degree. So we talked about...
Yeah, but don't say that, because we still
football.
need to be bringing new people into the fold.
That's news for the podcast, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, at the same time, though, it is sort of the basis for, because it always does seem to, we always do kind of come back to it, even at sometimes the oddest moments, how we'll be talking about something, and then all of a sudden it'll somehow come back to,
all of a sudden,
that one time in Final Fantasy IV.
You like Fisherman's Horizon.
And
or
that's
Fisherman's
actually
Horizon.
That's actually really fantastic because, there's always that undercurrent of Final Fantasy with whatever we got going on. And it's weird how it kind of subtly sneaks into a lot of the more general things that we talk about, both with forums and chat. I think that we're just about ready to wrap up from this. I've got a couple final thoughts, but if anybody wants to get in before I take over again, feel free. Here's your chance.
I'll talk about one more thing about fan sites. I think that in a large part, the rise of the wiki has replaced the role of the fan site in recent days. Because if I want, something that's a nicely organized table or something instead of a giant text file from GameFAQs, I'll go to one of the Wikia subsites or something. And and the regular editors for these independent wiki sites, separate from Wikipedia, sort of do have a community thing of their own, but I'm still going to say it's not quite the level of quality of a good fan site because there's much less quality control, and everything's usually part of a Creative Commons license that makes things a little bit too freewheeling. People can sort of write anything. And tying back into that narcissism discussion from before, sometimes if a fan gets out of hand on a specific wiki page, it'll dilute the quality of it. So, there has been discussion about making Caves of Narshan to a wiki, which is, I think, ridiculous. And a lot of good fan sites from the past, like RPG classics, have turned into wikis.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's actually funny that you bring that up because earlier, I'm pretty sure this is going to end up on the cutting room floor, because that conversation. No, not your stuff, Mike. You're good.
Okay.
I mean the conversation that I had with Tiddles earlier. Yeah, I know. I was reading the screen. Tiddles and I were actually talking about this just a little bit before you guys hopped in while we were gearing up for this, and I actually made a very similar point. There's a place for wikis, and if anybody from any of the big wikis out there ever hears this, I have no slight to what you guys are doing. I think you guys fill a niche and fill it well. I would personally never do a site on Wikia because that, as a professional web developer for many years, that sort of, lack of total control would really grate on me. But, there's good stuff that happens there. All the negative points that you bring up are also very, very valid, and they're very much, what I was talking about with Tiddles offline. I love that Con can have a consistent voice no matter what we're doing, and that voice is a little bit snarky, and it has fun with the subject matter,
Caves of
and
Snark.
it very often references Futurama, so I'm totally down with that part.
It's, I think it's interesting that you mentioned wikis, and I was thinking about this as we were talking about it. You're absolutely right that you kind of lack the quality control of a more controlled site like ours, but the trade-off to that is that for us, if we're busy, as we always tend to be now with other things, the things just kind of stop moving. The great thing about a wiki is that if the original creators move on, particularly if it's on something like Wiki that's a kind of, bigger site, that it'll just get picked up. I think that's the
you have
great
almost
thing about,
unlimited manpower. It's kind of startling even.
Yeah. The other interesting thing is you were talking about community with a wiki, and that is something I find kind of interesting. I mean, I guess part of the difference with a fan site like ours is we've always you have a forum and you have the chat, and that's been promoted as just a whole thing of its own, a whole venue for discussion. A lot of my experience with wikis, and this has been somewhat limited, so this may be not a fair representation, but a lot of my experience there is that it's a bit more. A lot of the discussion arises through kind of editing the content and getting the content right, and it's almost around the idea of making the wiki better more than it is about just having a community or just talking about the content of the wiki. Do you know what I mean?
The content is the community.
Yeah, it's
I
more
think is what
kind
you're
of
saying.
it's more kind of introverted. It's more kind of self-focused on the site than it is focused on the subject, if you know what I mean. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, I can draw parallels to that from when maybe Con had a bit more of manpower at its disposal. Going back a few years to when it was a little bit easier for us to crank out new content. There was a camaraderie that got built just from the nature of everybody being in a chat room working on stuff together.
yeah, absolutely.
And maybe those days are past, maybe not. I'd like to be optimistic about it, but that is something that probably has been hampered on our end by the rise of these a little bit more community-driven content sites. And I would always be happy to incorporate more people into the fold.
Well, I guess
see
the
what we can do.
thing with the wiki is it's just you feel like editing something, you see something that's not right, you see something that could be better, and you just go and do it.
Yeah.
The barrier to entry with a site like ours is much higher. You almost have to get involved in the community, or you have to make a forum post, and then we have to comment on it or do something about it, which we don't always have time to do these days, and it makes difficult. It's a little more difficult to get to that point where you're engaged with working on the content itself.
But I think what you said though does sort of point out a benefit of a fan site community over a wiki community, just because, like you were saying, the again, limited experience here as well, but that a wiki community is going to be more tied to the actual improving of content, the actual content itself, and so when you want to talk about something else, you go to a different place instead of going to that particular community. So it's a bit more, you've got separation, whereas I think for something like Con, we a lot of our conversation does take place on, in different subjects, and it's not, even when we are talking about, say, Final Fantasy, it's not strictly content related necessarily, because for instance, something like fan art, or even, this is a bit past now, but fan fiction even. Again, like what I was saying earlier, it's sort of in a fan site is almost the starting point, and then the community sort of goes from there, instead of being sort of fettered to it.
Yeah, I mean, you'd probably be much less likely to see a conversation just springing up out of nowhere about the Pope on a wiki site. I don't know, maybe if you're on the Pope wiki.
Yes, we alluded to the timing a little bit earlier on, but yes, today is Wednesday, March 13th, 2013, the day of the new Pope. DP's a little bit Catholic, so it's it's bigger news for him than maybe some other people. But we're going to let him have it.
Everybody remembers where they were when Pope Francis became the Pope, or at least we.
Yes, we're recording a podcast
right now.
I'm going to wrap up, because it's my prerogative to do so as the de facto host. When we were talking about this in our very first podcast, I wrote a couple sentences down, and I liked the way they sounded. So I'm going to read them verbatim here.
What were you saying about narcissism earlier, Josh?
I am king of the narcissists. But I've been doing it since like 1997. So
you're a hipster narcissist.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I was a narcissist way before it was cool.
Yeah.
That was creepy. The way I see Con's role, and indeed the role of the fan site in general, because obviously there are still a few out there. It's not just us. I can't be that narcissistic.
How many of them have been updated in the last year, though?
There should be a metric for that.
Oh, okay, all right.
If you want to find the one-up interview on Con, it's in the news section. I think a couple of those sites that were interviewed 3 years ago are still up. Not many.
I think from the sounds of your beginning bit, you need to dub some epic speech music behind this. This is sounding a bit like one of Winger's final thoughts. Man. You're all
so what? I am, and he is referring to Jeff Winger from Community, also a repeated topic of conversation in chat, particularly on Thursday nights and Friday mornings.
Cool.
At least until they finally pull the plug on that show, which will probably be in a couple months. Anyway, the way I see it, the role that Con and whatever other pissant website that you might go to as a listener, you should continue to embrace the fans that get it. And you should continue to provide and improve the content for those fans as much as you can, as often as you can. You should be a shepherd for the games that you cover on your website, because you don't know where that new gamer is going to come from that is just finding out that these games that you've loved for a decade or 2 decades or longer, they may be trying them for the first time. And even if your flock dwindles, they need a shepherd. You're not going to get rich doing it. You're not going to get famous doing it. Though, obviously, I will personally be famous by the time this podcast hits the air. And you just need to do it for as long as you feel you've got something to offer. I think we've still got something to offer. There's a lot of sites out there that still have something to offer. If you're hearing this and you want to start your own site, figure out something to offer, and then just do it until you can't do it anymore, and make the best of the time you got. And, wow, that really sounded a lot better on paper.
Well
done, John. Well done.
Yay, Jeff Winger.
Yeah, I can see the Winger comparison now. So
I'm texting, and there's nobody on the other end. That is an awesome metaphor for this podcast, as it turns out.
Oh.
Yay!
That should be the subtitle.
All right.
Josh and Tiddles in the morning.
Well, we already talked about the time difference and how warped it is. So it's kind of like Josh in the morning and Tiddles at tea time, which doesn't really have the same ring to it.
Nope.
We've been rolling for a good chunk of time now, so let's hit one last thing before we call it a day, and that is the fact that, once again, it is mid-March. For those of you who are especially in New England like me, or maybe a Penny Arcade fan, you might know that PAX East is coming up and actually a week from this weekend, so it's only about a week and a half away now. I am going for the first time. I'm only able to go on Sunday, both because that was the only time that I could get in by the time I bought a ticket, and also because having a family, it's not exactly easy to just bail for 3 days, including a weekend, and hang out at a gaming con as much as I'd like to.
Well, it is if you don't plan on coming back.
Well, yeah, that's true. My wife is a little bit more the breadwinner than I am, so I would like to still have a home to live in.
An official Caves of Narsh reporter.
Yes, that's kind of my main goal. I'm taking my big camera. I am taking a stack of con business cards, and I'm going to talk to as many people as I can. I'm going to hit the Squeenix booth, obviously. They have a booth, as they would at any major con, and I'm expecting to see not too terribly much that's interesting. But anything they'll let me take pictures of, I will do so, and I will get them up on the site.
Be sure to take a picture of the giant sign that says, "Please wait for more information on Final Fantasy X HD."
Or Versus 13, for that matter.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic question. What do you guys think will never ever show up there, but probably should? I think we got two big candidates right there.
Those.
Maybe Lightning Returns, and maybe possible English translations of some of their recent things, like Bravely Default.
Like Bravely Default. I would be happy to see Bravely Default make an appearance there.
I'd be happy to have an English translation of the title.
It's I'm not going to try to defend any of Square Enix's recent, game titles. They're way on the other side of crazy. But it's it's actually a pretty sweet looking game. It's a, turn-based retro RPG that has no hint of coming to the United States or Europe. So if they were to announce something like an English language release of that, I would be extremely surprised and happy, even though I don't own the system that it is coming out on.
I was about to say that exact same thing. I don't own it either, but it would be cool to see it over here. I think that over the years they've started to give us more credit, but some of their decisions lately have been a backslide from that, and it doesn't make any sense. For my money, I'd love to see Typo
Type
show
0.
up. Yeah, 0-0.
Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Who cares? Because it's not in English
Typo,
anyway.
yeah.
And now there's that group that is localizing it on their own. And that's part of the reason why I kind of want to see it make a surprise appearance. And this is something that I want to talk about in a future podcast. But there's a little bit, I don't want to say arrogance, because that's really not the right word. I really respect what this group of people are doing and trying to make this happen where they don't think it's going to happen organically. But it seems like patience is a virtue, and to see that game show up now or at E3, I think would be a big vindication for Squeenix's business methods of late. And I think that, to an extent, they kind of deserve that. Well, from what I've heard, that game is actually fantastic, and it is something that we should see here in one way or another.
Oh, it looks stunning.
Didn't they correct me if I'm wrong, but was that the game that they'd already done most of the localization for? Or was that a different title?
I
don't
know.
Rings a bell,
I
but I can't
think I did a news post on this, because I believe that they'd already done most of the localizations with voice actors and stuff. And then they just sort of paused it.
I do seem to recall reading that at some point.
Wait, no, you're right. It is.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I typed it, yeah.
Absolutely.
Huh.
Well, there you go.
I just did a quick Google search, and you're absolutely right. Apparently, they almost completed its localization, but not much has come from it.
On Twitter that one of the voice actors said that he'd even done a bunch of lines for it. Like, he felt that his part was completely done.
Yeah.
And they just haven't done anything with it. And, that kind of lends to the argument of, hey, you guys maybe jumped the gun on this just a little bit.
I mean, at this point,
it's been that way for a couple years, like a year or two, though.
Yeah, that's true. And there's probably not much excuse for it, but it remains to be seen.
Yeah, at this point, the PSP is basically dead, making the way for the Vita. So if it were to come out, I would suspect it would be a PlayStation Network only release, playable on the PSP or the Vita.
Yeah, which is fine.
Yeah, that sounds great to me, but you still have to question whether the market's there for it. I think yes, because Final Fantasy's in the title, and people will buy that.
Given the amount of work that seems to be done on it, I think that they have nothing to lose by releasing it now.
Isn't the PSP giving way to the PS Vita more or less just a corpse giving way to someone who's terminally ill?
And there's that great Tiddles charm.
Let's save that for another one.
But guys, it connects to the PS4, and that's totally a thing.
Yay!
I don't know if you guys have looked at all at the PAX schedule. I only looked at the day that I was going. Looks like I'm going to hit some fairly interesting panel discussions, I hope. So I'm going to hit one called An Inside Look at Indie RPGs, which might be cool. I'm not too familiar with a whole lot of indie RPGs, but...
Who are the panelists on that?
I don't have the slightest idea. I'm working from a list here, man.
All right.
Google it yourself.
I'm way ahead of you, sister. All right. There we go.
Oh, no, he didn't. Also going to take a look at one entitled The Future of Playing a Role in Video Game RPGs, which I think is a pretty interesting conversation to have, given that the gulf between Western RPGs and JRPGs seems to be widening all the time, and the fan bases for the two seem to be getting further and further apart from having any common ground. So that'll be interesting to see what comes out of that.
I've always had some strong opinions on that, so maybe that's
you
something
have indeed.
we
should pick that up again
future.
at another time when we've bored everybody to tears and it's just back to the two of us talking at random, as we've done for many years.
I do not recognize any of these indie RPGs from that panel.
Sweet. That means they're extra indie.
Yeah, they are too indie. I am not cool enough to have heard about these games.
That's absolutely perfect. You don't want mainstream indie people talking about indie games.
No way, man.
They're sellouts.
We are the
Now, the Indie RPGs panel also conflicts with one about geek parenting, which is something that's near and dear to my heart. So I may not make that panel at all, but we'll see. We'll give it some time and check it out. And then the last one I'd like to hit is something that will appeal to probably 3 of the 4 people talking right now, gamers with jobs. And I can barely even call myself a gamer nowadays. I really don't
even
game
have a job.
all that much. Ouch. Better job than you can.
Got heated in here.
I just kind of want to hear that conversation because all of us, none of us are getting any younger. And while there's always a new generation of gamers coming up, the generation that is represented here, Laz, you're in your mid-20s, mid to late 20s. Tiddles and I were talking earlier, I'm in my mid-30s now. Tiddles just turned 30 a few weeks ago. And we are of really what could be considered the first prime gaming generation, where we had, arcades dying out on our watch. Sorry about that, younger kids. We had the first, real super successful consoles, Atari 2600 notwithstanding. And we were also around for the rise of PC gaming. And we have so many things dividing our time now that what defines us as gamers now is probably really, really wildly different. And I'd kind of like to see what somebody else might have to say about that and see if it changes my thoughts on whether I can consider myself a gamer or not.
Well, I definitely consider myself a gamer, because, just at the time investment I put into playing video games and following the industry, but also I have the advantage of being unmarried and without any children and having a job that has me basically stay in one area. So I have, to a degree, the spare time to still be a gamer. It's not easy. Because I have to work overtime sometimes. I'm doing training and taking classes to try and get a better job down the line. But I'm still a gamer, but it was a lot easier when I was in school and had fewer responsibilities.
Yeah, and I kind of slighted DP a little bit with my intro to that.
Sure.
Because he's a lot younger and he is still in university, but I mean this kid works like a demon. And he doesn't have a whole lot of time for games either. Plus the fact that, his only gaming console is about 3,500 miles away from him right now.
Yeah, it's a sad time.
You couldn't smuggle a DS up there with in your Bible or something?
I don't own a DS. I don't own a DS or a PSP.
But you do own a Bible, so you're halfway there.
Also, any
no, I have
technology.
I have.
Sorry,
just cut out a couple Gospels, Shawshank Redemption style.
Okay. I have though. And one thing that because I obviously have my computer with me here, and I had never really gotten into PC gaming at all before basically being at a point where I had no choice, either PC gaming or nothing, and so I've definitely I don't have a whole lot of time, like Josh said. I'm kind of always working, it turns out, but certainly I've spent a lot more time in PC gaming than what I would have otherwise done, and I think there's definitely something in that, whereas I certainly before wouldn't have known a whole lot about it at all.
Yeah, I mean, just 10 minutes into a Google search tells me that there are many, many, many indie PC RPGs that no one has heard of. So
no one.
And for some of those, there may be an awesome reason why.
Yeah, perhaps.
Well,
we are talking about.
You'd listen to this thing, maybe you'd try some of them, and we.
Yeah, absolutely. I will be happy to report back with anything that I find good.
Yeah.
I mean, we are talking about a genre here that for quite a while was propped up by people running stuff out of RPG Maker. So,
yeah.
I suppose if we're mentioning indie RPGs,
there are a couple.
Up to Ian Peregrine, one of our own, who's done his own Regressia game. Which, sadly, I still haven't got around to playing. Which is
I haven't gotten to play a whole lot of it, but it really felt like a very old school Dragon Quest.
Yeah.
And it was actually a lot of fun. And we'll see if we can get that a little bit more promotion. If you guys are listening to this, feel free to tweet at me at Caves of Narsh, or visit us on Facebook or the site, and we'll definitely get you pointed in the right direction to give that a try, because he worked really hard on it, and it is a lot of fun to play from what I've seen so far, so it's worth checking out.
And perhaps that's, we always talk about, people around Final Fantasy always talk about, you need to get back to the roots and that sort of thing, and, for better or for worse. But, perhaps that's one real benefit of the indie RPG, that it's sort of in a position where it is, by default, it's at, the roots, basically. Yeah, you don't have all of those super advanced, graphic technologies or, what have you. So perhaps that is a very fertile ground then for the genre moving forward.
And, going back 5
it
minutes.
is. There's a lot of good indie RPGs out there. Even and one that was made in RPG Maker has lit up Steam a little bit. So you're right. It is fertile ground for a lot of sort of old school sensibilities and retro visuals and neat ideas. But I sort of like playing, indie RPGs and AAA RPGs, and I would like to see, both markets thrive.
Oh, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think going back 5 minutes, what DP just said, maybe that's what ends up bridging that gap that I was talking about between, your BioWare style RPG and your Squeenix style RPG. Maybe that's the niche that the indie developers can kind of plug the middle of.
Yeah.
The thing about an indie game, whether it's an RPG or anything else, is it's never going to be made by a bunch of people in suits sitting around a table thinking, what is a game that will appeal to the cool kids that we're not? The games
I would play that game.
Yeah, you play Final Fantasy, so you do.
If I see a Facebook post of like 3 developers on laptops dressed to the nines in 3-piece suits, I am buying that game, especially if they've got ridiculous beards.
All over that.
Oh man, the suit beard combo.
An indie game is, it's not something that necessarily appeals to everyone or even to a mass of people. It's something that at least one person is passionate about, which is not something I think you can always say about, a AAA game.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah, because
I'm looking at the clock here, boys.
Oh man.
And not to cut you off here, but
Not to cut you off here, but I gotta cut you off here.
yeah, not to cut you off here.
I blame
but
Josh.
We're just so fascinating. We just go on.
You know what?
Yeah, I think we had the.
I was nervous about this going in, and I think, for 3 people who have never done this before, and 1 person who has a little bit, at least as a consumer, more experience, I feel like we've done a pretty good job here today. And hopefully somebody out there thinks the same thing, maybe, someday.
You never know. If they find they just might like it.
Well, I'll promote it as best I can. But I do think that it's probably time to wrap this one up. I think when I get this all cut together, we're going to be hovering right around the hour mark, which is actually a lot better than I thought we'd do. And I'm proud of us for doing this. And I really want to thank all 3 of you guys for showing up today, because without you 3, it A, would have been exceptionally boring, and B, would have been about 14 minutes long.
Great time.
So, do you guys have anything you want to say to our legion of 3 fans before we sign off today?
We love you guys. Don't leave
We
us.
love you guys.
You are all handsome and/or pretty, and should ask us to make more of these.
Yeah.
Some of you might be both handsome and pretty.
I believe it.
If there are any ladies out here, I can hook you up with a picture of DP without a shirt on.
And we should have ended 20 seconds ago.
I think, wasn't the Winger monologue something like 20 minutes ago?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Did I say that was the end, though? I don't think I said that.
The
No,
Winger
you did.
monologue always comes in the last 2 minutes.
It's
Well,
totally
then I'll
gonna
just
be an
re-edit all the
outtake,
PAX
so
stuff
it'll
to
come
be
at the end
earlier.
anyway.
Just-
It'll be
Alright.
completely seamless because I am a gifted audio editor. All right, boys. Well, I had fun doing this. Hopefully we can do it again real soon with you guys, maybe with some more con special guests if we can round them up. And, hit us up. You know where to find us. We don't go anywhere. We lead very sedentary lives. So look out for the next episode if and when we do one. And until then, enjoy whatever it is that you're going to be playing. I suggest Final Fantasy Tactics.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again for listening. If you want to find us, we're at cavesofnarsh.com, on Twitter at Caves of Narsh, on Facebook, Caves of Narsh, on YouTube, Caves of Narsh. Seriously, check us out. We're alright. If you're wondering what the music was that you heard today, you heard at the beginning the final boss theme from the FF Origins release of Final Fantasy I. The interstitial was the victory fanfare from Final Fantasy VIII called The Winner. And the music that you're hearing right now is Songo de Chocobo, which was a remixed, arranged release on the Generation In album, which was released in Japan about 20 years ago. Thanks again for listening. Talk to you later.